How much did Joseph know? I tend to think he knew a lot more than he said.
He appears to purposefully be vague and mysterious.
What we have is not the Book of Ether. We have the account of Moroni taken from the Book of Ether. So we have a piece of art created by Moroni to tell us something.
You have you seen Jerry Grover's recent interview? Am I allowed to mention other?
Yeah, sure.
He's on Ward Radio.
Grover, sure. Ward Radio are friends.
He's analyzing the names of the Book of Ether from a Sumerian perspective. That dude's awesome, so smart, and it was so fascinating.
Yeah.
And so what you appear to have is a Adamic record, which might be Sumerian in nature, right? Because their language is not confounded, supposedly, but it's got to be, to some degree, corrupted by Sumerian versus Adamic, or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
And then you have a Hebrew record, which is not really a Hebrew record. It's a Reformed Egyptian record, but it's the tail end of the Reformed Egyptian record, and they admit we're not really as good at doing the Reformed Egyptian as we used to be. Only a few of us can do this.
Yeah.
So you have truly a piece of art, right? Almost like a Joseph Smith type thing where we have this notion that Joseph is like magically getting the words to write, and Oliver Cowdery tries to do that, and Joseph's like, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think we underestimate, I think we misunderstand the Book of Mormon, a lot of the sort of number comparisons you're making, and I want to ask kind of how you read them. I think we gravely risk misunderstanding the Book of Mormon if we don't take into account that there are poets who are creating this work for us.
Yeah.
And that does not mean the Book of Mormon is fiction. It means the Book of Mormon is an ancient work of poetry. It is a prophetic work. It doesn't mean it doesn't contain history, but it does mean that if we see that 43 men are sent somewhere and they recover 24 of something, that we know that doesn't necessarily really mean that there were 43 guys and they went somewhere and found 20. Like, it can mean something else.
Yeah. What if their names are not even their names, but are an act of poetic scripture
I think
writing?
That's probably systematically the case. But like, why do we have two different missionaries named Ammon, and each one has 3 named companions?
Yeah.
Why is it Ammon plus 3 twice?
Yeah.
Right? That's strange. It feels like deliberate poetic creation, not by Joseph. So you use the word masterfully. One of the ways in which I think the Book of Mormon is masterful is it's effortless and it's unself-conscious. It never points at itself.
Right.
Look at me. Look at the connection I made. Look at the symbolism. Look at the symmetry. It never does that.
Yeah.
It just goes right ahead and very dryly tells its tale, right? And I think this is why we've missed it, because we inherit a bunch of 19th century Protestants inherited the Book of Mormon and tried to read the Book of Mormon like 19th century Protestants read the Bible.
Yeah, right.
When we read it at all. And I think that leaves us at the Peshat level of interpretation.
Yeah.
We read everything
literally. And if you stay there, the scholarly world rightfully will challenge you and beat you.
Sure.
Right? Because if you can't graduate from that level, you'll never come to understand, I think, how God works with man. Like, this is not an exercise here in this world to prove that God exists. Right?
100%.
This is an exercise to prove why we need him.
Right.
And why he must exist for us to have a meaningful existence.
Right. The Book of Mormon is a very interesting piece of evidence for the prophetic calling of Joseph Smith, but that is not the point of the Book of Mormon.
Well, and that's part of what I started to realize in looking at the Book of Revelation in comparison to the Book of Mormon is how often Joseph could have said, look what I did here.
Right.
But he never does that.
Or in his subsequent career, we have lots of his people writing down his speeches.
Right.
or Revelations, and he never says, by the way, you will notice that I changed the number of spirits from 7 to 12. And here's why. Or, in his sermons. So it's this interesting question. I tend to think, there's this question of how much did Joseph know? I tend to think he knew a lot more than he said.
Yeah.
But whether he did or not, like the Book of Mormon is this astonishingly complex work about which he says surprisingly little.
Yeah. And in fact, if you look at like where he makes reflections through Revelation in D&C 77 on the Book of Revelation, he appears to purposefully be vague and mysterious.
Interesting.
Which matches the lead-in by these ancient prophets to each other's works.
Yeah.
So Joseph matches very well the prophetic posture of these ancient prophets in his ability to reveal.
So let me ask you, the 43 and the 24. So are you thinking that the presence of these numbers is pointing at the Book of Mormon, or are you thinking that the presence of these numbers together point at something else?
Both.
Okay.
So and let's go to that, okay? So the Book of Mormon clearly appears to be attempting to connect itself to the Book of Revelation with these numbers.
Okay, interesting.
And including the sacrifice of the final 24 Nephites upon the hill Cumorah, which is how you get a martyr, right? And what is John seeing? 24 elders dressed in white, which later will be equated to those who have been subjected to martyrdom.
Mm-hmm.
Or, if not from the perspective of martyrdom in that you were killed, a servant's life dedicated to the work of the Lord at the expense of all other things in a human's life. So the Book of Mormon will do this all the way up. We have up to the very end. And so if we go back to the Book of Revelation, we've got 24 elders with a keen interest in a sealed book that was, and I mean 24 Book of Mormon elders, right, with a keen interest in a sealed book passed to Moroni upon the same hill where 24 surviving Nephites died, and the book was buried by the final custodian to come forth in the latter day. Now, the 4 and 20 elders in Revelation 4 fall down before the throne, and they say, "Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power." In Revelation 5, John says, I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within, and on the backside sealed with 7 seals. Moroni seals the record. Ether seals the record. They both make mention of this directly in the scripture, that they're commanded to seal. According to one witness of the Book of Mormon, there was a sealant securing about half the book from tampering, and this sealed portion made it impossible to separate the leaves and appeared as solid as wood. That, I think, was David Whitmer interview. So Revelation 5:1, I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within, and on the backside sealed with 7 seals. Now, Joseph will say in D&C 77:6, he'll answer a question, what are we to understand by the book which John saw, which was sealed on the back with 7 seals? Joseph says we are to understand that it contains the revealed will, mysteries, and the works of God. And I think this is the key part. The hidden things of his economy concerning this earth during the 7,000 years of its continuance. Now, I would argue that we, like the ancient Jaredites, or unlike, the ancient Jaredites, we have had our language confounded. And our confounding has come in a very short period of time. You're familiar with Royal Skousen, who does the study on the language, the 16th century.
Of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, and if you think about the Book of Mormon from the perspective of 16th century English and the Bible as well, we don't speak 16th century English, right? Sure. We don't even understand it.
Sure.
So when we see a word like the economy, if I were to look that up in Webster's 1828 dictionary, which gives us a much better idea of its meaning in 16th century English, it says primarily the management, regulation, and government of a family. Mm-hmm. Okay, now think of those words: regulation, management, government. all three of those words imply some authority, right?
Nomos is law. Oikos is house. It's the law of the house. That's what economy
interesting.
Is. Yeah.
So we're talking keys, right? I mean, if we're talking regulation, government, and management, you can't do those things without keys. So what Joseph appears to be saying is that the 7 seals, each one is related to keys. Mm-hmm. And Joseph will then claim he stands at the precipice of a restoration of all things in the dispensation of the fullness of times, which means as we open these seals, we're not necessarily being given a history. We're rather being given imagery relative to keys and authority being restored. Now, again, from an LDS perspective, that should just cause alarm bells to go off in our head that John is unsealing or seeing the unsealing at a future date of these keys to somebody or something.